Good morning. Welcome back to Antigua Barbuda today, and good morning to you and yours all around the world. Facebook Live, 90.5 FM. And of course, it's a bit different with the show because, you know, it's election time. We're on the road to March 21st. I'm here with the PRO of the Antigua Barbuda Electoral Commission, and she's Elisa Graham, Mrs. Elisa Graham, and she's here. It's nomination day, so we'll be asking her questions about today, the process about today, and then you know the other questions about people collecting their cards, their weapon, and all that. So, Elisa, good morning.
Good morning. And how are you? I'm good.
Fine, thank you, my dear.
I'm good.
Today, nomination day, I would like you to just explain the process to all the folks who are watching, and especially to the younger folks who will say, nomination day, because if you realize on social media, a lot of them are now involved in campaigning, a lot of them are involved with what's happening. So just explain to them the process, nomination day, and what it means to be nominated, and why you have to have your weapon, and all that, and the different polling stations where nominations will be taking place, and from what time too.
Okay. Well, good morning. Well, we are actually 5 minutes away from the official start of nomination day. Nomination day begins at 8 a.m. and will culminate at 6 p.m. Now, nomination day is basically the day when candidates are duly nominated. Okay. It is the process by which persons, a seconder, a proposer, a seconder, and 8 other persons who reside in the constituency. That is basically how a person gets nominated. They will have to go to the respective nomination centers with these individuals, the proposer, the seconder, and 8 other persons who must be registered within the constituency that they're contesting. Now, they will affix their names to a form in the presence of the returning officer, who is basically the person in charge of the entire proceedings. And then basically they'll have a brief description of themselves, nothing too long, nothing more than 6 words. And basically they'll affix their signature to the form, the consent form, and then at the end of the day, persons will know exactly who's nominated. Now, of course, you cannot be nominated unless you have all those 10 persons in place. Now, all those 10 persons don't necessarily have to come at one time. They can come throughout the day, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. If at 6 p.m. comes and someone doesn't necessarily have all the individuals that they need to be nominated, then unfortunately, you know, that's not in their best interest.
So let me just ask this in the simplest form. I am the representative for a party within a constituency. If my nomination day doesn't go as well, I'm not. You can't go vote and say you're voting for me. That's what you're trying to tell me.
Yes, you have to be duly nominated.
So when the ballot paper gets in and everything, my name will be on it or not?
No, your name won't be there.
So then it will just make no sense if this process don't work out for me.
Well, that is why most persons ahead of time, they would already have the list of persons who they know for sure are going to show up and who they know for sure is going to be there to ensure that they get nominated. So this is a working process.
Even if I miss it by one?
Yes, even if you miss it by one.
All right. So this happens today. As you said, the folks who they chose to, like, out the 10 to come, why we all can come together?
Yeah, I mean, some persons actually would make provisions to ensure that the entire posse, as I like to call it, would show up together, and it's a big rally and so on. I know, as of course, you know, as a journalist covering it in the last 2 elections before, I would see persons show up with their entire party with them. So that, of course, you know, you go in, you fill out the form, and of course, you officially the candidate.
Get it over with.
Exactly.
Get it over with.
Respective parties.
So for everyone who is vying for a seat right now, none of them is official.
Until you're officially nominated, and of course until the supervisor of elections would have published the list of nominees, and that should be published. Well, once we get everything in by 6 p.m. today, then of course we will officially have that list hopefully tonight and or into tomorrow morning. The returning officers have to stay at the respective nomination centers from 8 a.m. and I know for sure most of them, actually all of them are already in place, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Even if the 2 of the candidates decide, hey, you know what, let's get it over and done with early in the morning, they have to stay there by law, the Representation of the People's Act by which the Antigua Barbuda Electoral Commission is governed by, until 6 p.m. And then, of course, prospective candidates should ensure that you walk with $500 legal tender. That is very important. No check, $500, no credit cards, $500 cash. And then that is basically will be paid to the returning officer, who will then give you a receipt. And of course, prospective candidates are encouraged to hold their receipts so that after elections, you know, if they're successful or once they would have gotten the respective votes of 1/8 of the votes, that is the votes casted, then they will get back the deposit. If not, then unfortunately, that's not the case.
Forfeit. All right, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go over to Nicola for top of the hour, and then we get back to you, Elisa, because I want to be asking questions. I want to ask questions about the different polling, the different stations where they'll be going today, nominating today. So back over to you, Nicola, for top of the hour, and then we'll be right back here.
Thank you so much, Ibis, and of course, Elisa Graham, PRO of the Electoral Commission. It is 8 a.m. in Antigua Barbuda. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines at this time. In the news this morning, hours before nomination day, the UPP launches its Hope campaign. Prime Minister Gaston Brown leads the way as candidates get on the campaign trail. And a former Electoral Commission chairman supports the decision to make Barbudans vote outside of the island constituency.
Okay, Nicola, thank you for that. And I'm going to say news is hot. Everything is election right now. So let's talk about the different stations where they'll be going to, the different areas in the different constituencies for nomination today.
Definitely, and I have the list right in front of me. So for the persons in St. John City West, that is at the Villa Primary School, and the returning officer there will be Desmond Anthony. St. John City East, that is at the Princess Margaret School, and the returning officer for that area will be Larissa Francis. St. John City South is at the Mary E. Pickett Primary School. The returning officer is Akura Richards. St. John's Rural West will be at the Green Bay Primary School. The returning officer will be Ralston Nikio. St. John's Rural South is at the Golden Grove Primary School. The returning officer is Mrs. Carolyn Thomas Parker. St. John's Rural East is at the Clear Hall Secondary School. The returning officer, Lonnie Benjamin Hughes. St. John's Rural North is at the Cedar Grove Primary School. The returning officer is Lilia Manwarren. St. Mary's North is at the Antigua State College. The returning officer is Birchfield Osborne. St. Mary's South is at the Bowlands Primary School. The returning officer, Denise Parker. All Saints East and St. Luke, the place for nomination is at the Irene B. Williams Primary School. Returning officer, Denmore Roberts. All Saints West, CV Farm Primary School. Thomasine Greenaway White is the returning officer there. St. George's, Potters Primary School, Vivica Shadrack is the returning officer. St. Peter is at the Palm Primary School, Stephen Samuels is the returning officer. St. Philip North, Willikeys Primary School, Avanella Benjamin is the returning officer. St. Philip South is at the Freetown Primary School, Kellum Hughes is the returning officer. St. Paul's is at the Liberta Primary School, Cora Huggins is the returning officer. And for Barbuda, is taking place at the St. McChesney George Secondary School, and Miss Vernice Mack is the returning officer there. And that team would have already left on Saturday. For the team for Barbuda, they would have left on Saturday for to ensure the preparations are routine.
Well, you know, we here at ABS will have extensive coverage of nomination day all over the different polling stations. And you know, back in the day when you were here,
Yes.
driving up and down,
Oh, yes.
all over the place.
Very busy day.
A very exciting day too.
And exciting, yes.
Okay, today's nomination day, yes, we've got that. Now, what is next for the Electoral Commission as of 6 p.m. tonight?
Well, as of 6 p.m. tonight, hopefully by then we would have had all the respective forms come in, so we'd officially know the candidates who will be contesting the 2018 general elections on March 21st. Now, of course, after we would have already officially published those names, then the supervisor of elections and her team will start to officially prepare the ballot papers, because by now we would know all the candidates and their respective symbols, so we will start to prepare the ballot papers from that.
From then. And what about people coming in to collect their voter ID, or, you know, those folks who haven't received theirs as yet? And I'm noticing that y'all are opening on the weekends too.
Yes, starting this past weekend, we are officially opening our doors from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays up until election day, so up until March 21st. Persons will be able to come to our office from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays for the sole purpose of replacement cards. So that will basically lessen the traffic during the week when we actually start to give out the cards for those persons who would have passed the claims and objections and who would have registered prior to January 31st, 2018.
Now, there's one question I'd like for you to answer, because I had a conversation yesterday, and imagine somebody, oh, we could go register Monday and we could get my card ready for elections. Like, you're not listening to the news, man. You're not reading the papers. I don't understand what's happening here.
I don't
so you
understand
explain
either.
that term for me, please. When do you register, and how long does it take before you can receive your card? Because I can register Monday
Well,
and get my card.
casually,
No,
of
man.
course, registration is an ongoing process. But as I've been telling persons, if of course you would not have registered up until the period of January 31st, then unfortunately you will not be able to cast a ballot in the March 21st general elections.
Now, when you say ongoing process, meaning after election you still can register?
Yes, you can
Okay.
register
I
on
want
now
them to
too.
understand
You
that,
can
you know.
register on now too. I mean, we
Okay.
have had quite a number of excited 18-year-olds who are calling and saying, oh, you know, I just turned 18, I want to get registered. Now, of course, I had to explain the process to them and, of course, encourage them, please still go out to your respective registration units and get registered, because you want, by the time the next general election is called, especially since, you know, even though an election is constitutionally due every 5 years, the Prime Minister, after a period of 2 to 3 years, have the right to say, hey, you know what, I want to call an election. And that's basically what happened.
After 2 to 3 years?
Yes.
So, okay, so it's constitutionally correct.
Yes.
So it's, after 2 years, I'm in power. After 2 years, I can
2
just come
3
and-
years thereabouts. Because,
Two-
I mean, this particular case is like a period of what? 3, 4 years, three and a half years. And the Prime Minister is like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I want an election now. And he called the election. You want to always make
Once the
sure-
Electoral Commission is ready.
Well,
we
that
are always
too,
ready.
That too, we are always ready.
Okay.
And that is something else that persons need to understand.
What-
We are mandated to always be in the state of readiness. So even though, of course, there are certain things that we would have to put in place, the basics are already there.
But with the Prime Minister looking to call a date, he has to consult with the Electoral Commission.
Yes, he will definitely have to consult with the supervisor of elections, as well as the Antigua Barbuda Electoral Commission, which is a 7-member board that oversee the electoral process.
All right, back to the card, back to those who getting registered for their cards. How long the process takes before you can receive your card, get that phone call to set up your card?
Well, of course, persons will have to go through the period of claims and objections, which takes approximately 4 to 6 weeks thereabouts. And then afterwards, once nobody objects against your name to say, Steve Iris Freeland lives in Parham, just for example, when really and truly you live in Freetown, then of course you would receive a call to say, hey, you know what, we're in the process of printing your cards, and then you'll get a date as to when you would actually be able to collect your card.
Okay, I'm glad I got that out of the way with everybody.
Yes,
you
very
understand
important.
that you can't go register today. You can
No.
register today,
Yes, but you just
But
won't
don't
be able
expect
to vote
to
in the
receive
election.
your
Yes,
card
because
for the
everything is a process,
21st.
and we want persons to understand that we are as transparent as possible, and we abide by the representation of the People's Amendment Act. There is nothing that we do that goes contrary to the act. Of course, there's a whole bunch of controversial issues pertaining to that, but trust and believe I can stand by my word and say that we operate solely in context with the law.
Well, I know everybody, when you go on different interviews, everybody have their particular questions, and it seems to be the same question. But this question is going to be different. What about the relationship with all the different candidates? How often do they call you, especially, for information and want to know when they can do this and do that?
Well, I would suspect that after today, that those calls will actually increase. Of course, persons have been coming to the office. Persons have also been calling the supervisor of elections along with his secretary and so on. And of course, we answer the questions. I know our Facebook page is very, very active as well. The Antigua Barbuda Electoral Commission, that's our Facebook page, and of course our website www.abec.gov.ag, and persons have been posting their questions, persons have been, you know, sending emails and so on, so the relationship is very good.
Very good. Okay. Finally, we're going to go over the list again quickly and put it up on our monitors here on the
Yes.
screen so you can see it as we call them as we go along. So you should understand what day today is, nomination day,
Yes.
and how important it is for all candidates, whatever party, whatever independent
Oh, yes,
person
we
you
can't
are.
forget the
If you're
independents
not
either.
nominated, we don't care who you are, bro or sister. You would not be on our ballots. That's all we're saying. So make sure you get everything sorted for today. So, Elisa.
So the returning officers and places for nomination date today, March 5th, 2018, are as follows. St. John City West, place for nomination, the Villa Primary School. The returning officer there is Desmond Anthony. St. John City East, the Princess Margaret School, Larissa Francis, the returning officer. St. John City South, the Mary E. Pickett Primary School, Ikora Richards, the returning officer. St. John's Rural West, the Green Bay Primary School, returning officer Ralston Nikio. St. John's Rural South, the Golden Grove Primary School, returning officer Carolyn Thomas Parker. St. John's Rural East, the Clear Hall Secondary School, returning officer Lorna Mae Benjamin Hughes. St. John's Rural North, the Cedar Grove Primary School, returning officer Lillian Warren. St. Mary's North, the Antigua State College, returning officer Birchfield Osborne. St. Mary's South, returning officer Denise Parker, place for nomination Bowlands Primary School. All Saints East and St. Luke will take place at the Aaron B. Williams Primary School, returning officer Denwell Roberts. All Saints West, the Seaview Farm Primary School, returning officer Thomasine Greenaway White. St. George, the Potters Primary School, returning officer Vivica Shadrack. St. Peter's, the Parham Primary School, returning officer Stephen Samuels. St. Philip North, the Willikeys Primary School, returning officer Avanella Benjamin. St. Philip South, the Freetown Primary School, returning officer Callum Hughes. St. Paul's, the Liberta Primary School, returning officer Cora Huggins. And Barbuda, the McChesney George Secondary School, returning officer Vernice Mack. And of course, I would like to remind persons that training officially begins tomorrow, the 6th of March until the 9th of March, for persons who would be chosen to be either presiding officers or poll clerks. Now, of course, the period of training is for a week, and then at the end of that week, persons will be expected to sit an examination as well as participate in simulation exercises. And based on your performance, then is when you would know whether or not you would actually be having the post of presiding officer or poll clerk on March 21st, election day.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Elisa Graham, Public Relations Officer
Thank you so
within the
much.
Antigua Barbuda Electoral Commission. And folks, remember, it's nomination day. Keep it right here on ABS Radio, ABS Television, Facebook page, and you will see all the candidates who will be getting nominated today. And of course, Electoral Commission will hand us that list for our newscast
Definitely.
later on. Antigua Barbuda, we'll be right back.